Hey guys, it's Ryan from Kansas Bass Fishing, and today we're going to cover jig selection. These are the jigs that I like to use when I'm out fishing, whether it be at lakes or ponds. I generally fish jigs more at a lake, just seems like you can generally get a bigger bite with a jig. But I will use some jigs at ponds, and I'm going to cover the different kinds today. There's really four main categories of jigs that I like to use, I guess that most anglers would refer to. The first one being a casting or flipping jig. And I'll go into depth about these more as we'll come back to the beginning after I go through all of them. The second kind is a football head jig. The third is a finesse jig. And the fourth, a swim jig. Alright, so going back to the casting and flipping jigs, the reason I showed you two jigs here is, and these are both considered casting jigs, but I like to use a little bit heavier weight when I'm flipping, so I decided to go ahead and throw in two jigs. I'm going to talk about them a little separately. So we'll start with the smaller one, which I like to use again as a casting jig. The reason it's called casting jig, like I said, you're just generally making long casts with it. It's a bottom feeling bait. Right here you can see it's got the flat head on this side. This is a Strike King Pro model jig. And it's got your flat side right here that stands up real nicely. I'm not sure how well it's standing right now, or if you can tell because all the hairs, but it's got a pretty good lean to it. And obviously with the trailer on it, it's going to float a little bit because of the buoyancy of the soft plastic. But generally when I'm throwing one of these, I'm going to go over the trailers that I like to use with these. I'll generally throw something with bigger, it's always a crawl pattern for me. And or a crawl, type trailer. And here's a few of my favorites, like the Paca chunk. As you can see, it's got the real big appendages here, and it gives it a really good flipping action as you're pulling it through the water. Same with this chigger crawl. I may trim the end off these when I'm using them, but generally I'll leave it full length. It just depends on the size of the fish that I'm generally catching there in that body of water. And the last one is a Strike King Rage Claw, or Rage Tail, I'm not exactly sure what the craw's called. But anyways, yeah, I like to fish these pretty much in a crawl pattern as far as when I'm retrieving. I'll give it a couple pops when I'm using these because it'll give these a really nice flutter. And occasionally, actually, because of that flutter, if you're reeling in up to the boat, sometimes a fish will follow it thinking it's all of a sudden a sunfish or a bluegill or something along those lines. But that's what I like to use with the casting jig. The next jig that I like to use, well, I guess the second category of casting jig, will be a flipping jig. And this is one I like to use for a flipping jig right here. It's a Booyah, whatever their jigs are called. Maybe Boo jig. Anyways, as you can see, it's got a little bit bigger head. Still got the flat side, but it's got a little bit pointier nose, so it penetrates through any grass that you'd be flipping into. As you can see, it's got a little bit bigger hook too. It's a little bit heavier. I'll bring in the other one just so I can show you. So obviously this one's going to be a little bit thicker wire. Both have rattles. I'm not sure I pointed out with the first one. But like I said, this one I still use it for casting if I'm in deeper water because I think this is a 1/2 ounce jig. And I generally won't go heavier than this because like I said, I'm in Kansas. And generally I don't fish that deep of bodies of water around here. So usually a 1/2 ounce is as heavy as I need to go. Trailers with that are basically the exact same as the casting jig. The difference is though, I may also use a creature bait. That's a Berkeley Pit Boss, I believe. I'm not sure what color it is. And obviously I'm not matching all the colors to whatever jig I put out here. I'm just using these for examples. I figured at least you guys can get an idea of what I'm using. But yeah, you can use a number of different creature or beaver baits when you're flipping. Generally when I'm flipping though, I do like to use some sort of creature bait because it gives it a bigger profile that when it first gets into the water, the bass seem to pick up on it really quick. So I really like to use these. Okay, so that's casting and flipping jigs. The next category we're going to get into is a football jig. Now this is a little bit smaller football head jig, but at least give you guys a good idea. I think it's a 3/8 ounce, I'm not really sure though. But as you can see, where it gets its name from is the football-shaped head. And essentially the point of these is you generally don't fish these deep and in flat areas because, again, it's another kind that'll roll up and sit. That one even sits up, it's easier to tell. It's going to sit up real nice for you. With these, I'm generally going to use the same kind of trailers with the Packer Craw, the Rage Craw, and the Power Bait. Cheer Craw, that's it. But I'll generally use the same ones because I like to use the bigger appendages on those because I'm generally going with the bigger profile. But as you notice, these generally have a little bit lighter wire hooks just so you get a little bit more power to penetrate into that fish's mouth, and you don't have to get quite as bad of a hook set. The generally pretty sharp. It's got pretty normal weed guard. I'd say this one's a little bit heavier duty. But I will fish a little bit heavier football jig than this normally. This is just one I have when I'm fishing, when the fish are deep in ponds and I have to throw out to the middle. But again, fishing these, I mean, the difference here will be instead of, that twitch pause that I would do with a casting jig, with this, I'm generally just gonna lightly wobble my rod because essentially it's just gonna walk along with that football head. It's probably the other person knows wobble along, it draws in those bass because it keeps it in front of the strike zone a little bit longer. So that's football jigs. The next category is a finesse jig. This is a little bit bigger finesse jig. It's a War Eagle. I think it's called the heavy duty jig. I might be completely wrong, but the big difference here is going to be you're going to have your lighter wire hook, and it's going to have a lot thinner or a lot less amount of hairs on the jig, and obviously going to have this little, I call it a crown. But these are great in cold water conditions when the bass are a little bit more finicky. They're real easy to fish, and when you're fishing around, I like to use them also in ponds when I'm around smaller fish. It doesn't intimidate the bass as much. Now, generally, when I'm going to use these, I'm going to throw a little bit more realistic trailer. And by that I mean, something that's a little bit more spot-on craw. And this is a Yum craw. I'm not exactly sure the name of it. And this one is a craw by Lake Fork Tackle. I'm not sure if they make this one anymore, but these are great baits if you can find them. And yeah, generally I'll cut off the tail on these because, again, you don't want them to be quite as long, so you're going for a smaller presentation. But I'll fish either like a football jig or I'll fish it like a casting jig. I can go either way with this. But the key is you want to work it a lot slower. A lot of the time I'll be fishing them on beds because, again, it really seems to freak out the bass, and during the spawn they're generally going to be looking for something a little more realistic to bite at versus going with something with a little bit bigger appendages like this packet chunk that I throw on a casting jig. So that's finesse jigs. The last kind, and this is kind of a different jig because it doesn't really fish like, or I should say I don't fish it like other jigs. And that is the swim jig. Now, things you'll notice about this, it's got a little bit lighter weed guard. Again, a lighter wire hook, and the head's the biggest difference. It's obviously got a very pointy head. Now, some people just fish these to fish them through things like grass and like that, but I like to fish honestly more like a spinnerbait. Reason being, it's like a more subtle way to fish it, and I'd say it's a little bit more than just throwing a paddle tail swim bait. And that's generally what I like to put on the back of this. I believe I showed this in my last video, this same swim bait. But it's any paddle tail, and it's just going to give it a good kicking action. It's got the rattles in there. And again, I throw this in ponds and lakes. It really seems to draw fish in because it's got a little bit bigger presentation than your regular swim bait. But it's not going to be too overbearing. It's just going to give it enough action to really draw those fish in. But it's just a casting and reeling for me mostly, some twitching as I'm coming in to give it that dying shad presentation, or dying bluegill, depending on the color I'm using. But that's generally how I like to throw them. Well, that's it for jig selection. If you like this video, leave a like and subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any questions.